spring. It's on sustainability this spring semester. And this is the sixth of our speakers today, Mr. David Walfish. I want to remind you that on the 17th we have our final speaker, Dana Rash, Professor Rash, who will be speaking about his community development work in Ecuador. He's got a wonderful project with a small community in Ecuador he's been working on for several years to get a health system going and in general help develop the community from a sustainability point of view. While David's loading up, I wanted to simply tell you that I guess it was a couple of years ago, I got a phone call from a guy named David Walfish saying, hey, I got this, I'm in this competition at Harvard for projects that are social business related. And so I said, well, and he was also taking my online class at the time, so I said, well, let's talk about it. So we got to talking about it. And he was one of 10 finalists for the Harvard competition, and he was searching for a little support financially. And fortunately, we were able to come up with a tad bit of money to help with his travel expenses. And lo and behold, he won first place at that competition. So David, and since then, David has been conducting pilot projects in the Pacific of his aquaponics venture. So I'll turn it over to David.
Great.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Prof. Debbie. Thanks for having me. David Walfish. Thanks for coming out. So I'm used to pitching for a minute, 3 minutes. So this 40-minute thing is a little bit odd to me, but I'll do my best. And if I get boring, feel free to cut me off. Also, I encourage any questions you guys have at any point. It'll make it a little more interesting. So, okay. Is there a clicker, or should I just?
Pardon me?
Is this the?
Yeah. See if I can remember how to do that.
I can just use this actually. This one probably easier. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do, I'll show you the pitch we've used. We've got a new one, not quite ready yet. Check later this week, hopefully, on our website. But I'll show you an older pitch we have to give you kind of an idea of what we're specifically trying to do. And I'll take a step back in my talk and tell you about why we're doing what we do. And then at the end, I'll finish with specifics again of our particular plan. So hopefully the sound works and everything.
Just click no on that.
Is that good, or you want it all the way off?
That's fine.
Might have better luck if you just copy the URL and go to
Okay.
it.
Thinking.
You might want to try to open the browser in the background first.
Okay, if I can escape out of this.
Yeah.
Save me. Alright, let's see. What's the force click command?
Control-Alt-Del. That'll always work.
And the Dell's the
There you go.
okay, there we go.
So you got two blinky things in the background. That's probably good.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm gonna close up on things and like, just no go through.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
that's for your security, by the way.
Thank you.
You have been secured.
Perfect. All right, I think we're in business. Hope this sounds up too.
Hello. I'm David Walfish. On behalf of the people who exhibit, thank you for your interest in our project. Pacific Islands are some of the most isolated land masses in the world. At one time, they were completely self-sufficient. foreign companies exhausted fisheries, strip mine land, and disrupted traditional subsistence culture. Today, Pacific Islanders can no longer fish or farm and are completely dependent on expensive imported food. With foreign companies gone, Pacific Islanders are now jobless and unable to properly feed their families. They're left with two undesirable choices: feed their children low-nutrition, high-calorie food, or leave the islands and the families they love. People are leaving the islands at the world's highest rates. Those who remain endure the highest levels of obesity and diabetes in the world. Over the past year, we've piloted an innovative backyard aquaponics system in American Samoa. Today, Nia, a mother of two, is regaining self-sufficiency by producing nearly 250 pounds of healthy food each year. Our system is 6 times more productive than traditional agriculture, uses 98% less water, and only costs $350. Building upon our technical success, we seek to create a new sustainable agriculture industry. Community-based hubs, the cornerstone for a paid-for model, will commercialize our technology and distribute capital, training, and affordable supplies to aspiring farmers. Almost produce each farmer's family can't consume will be sold to the hub, giving them much-needed income. It will process these vegetables with those it has grown itself and sell them to nearby businesses. Income will be reinvested to recruit new farmers and fund new hubs, fueling exponential growth. Thank you for your time. With your support, we can help the Pacific Islands reclaim their once vibrant, self-sufficient culture. Keep families like Nia's healthy and at home.
Okay, so gives you a little background what we're doing. Now go into some of the specifics. So for anyone who's spending any time in Hawaii, you know it can be a challenge. I mean, it looks like paradise. At the same time, we're isolated, right? We depend on the rest of the world for a lot of our food and our energy. And just last month, the West Hawaii Tribune said that our inventory of fresh produce will last less than 10 days, right, without being restocking. And Hawaii imports 90% of beef, 8% of milk, 2/3 of fresh vegetables, and about 2/3 of fresh fruits. So very, very dependent on the rest of the world. And if you can imagine how tough it is, you know how tough it is in Hawaii. If you can imagine we're even more isolated, right? Let's say American Samoa, who's even more isolated than we are, the problems are exacerbated. Problems compound themselves when the largest industry in the country is closes down. So in 2009, in American Samoa, for example, just to give you one example, there was a plant closure of Chick on the Sea, followed closely by several layoffs from circus. And so the tuna packing industry in American Samoa represents 1/3 of all the jobs. And the other 2/3, which are government and private sector, are both dependent on tuna cannery as well. So it absolutely decimated the industry there and the workforce. So unemployment rate now stands around 30%. And what makes matters worse, prices in American Samoa on the bottom line are incredibly high. So you can see a selection of 4 items. So what it means, as we said in the video, is people either have to leave, which many do, right? So you can see the rates of people leaving. I'd like to point out number 2 and 3 are war-torn nations. It makes a lot of sense, right? Chesters in the middle Pacific, and they're leaving at the world's highest rates. So very, very high immigration rates. Either they leave, or they're stuck with unaffordable healthy food, and they end up eating processed, non-nutritious food. And so therefore, the top 7 most overweight nations in the world are all in the Pacific. Leads to very high diabetes. So American Samoa diabetes rates 47% versus the worldwide rate, which is almost 6%. So very, very high diabetes rates. So the question is what to do about it. So we believe one of the solutions is aquaponics. And so you're not familiar with it, actually gets a lot of press and a lot of attention here in Hawaii. But if you're not familiar with it, basically depends on the fish. There's two inputs, basically. There's a little bit more to that, but basically two inputs. You've got the fish, which you feed with fish feeds, that's one input, and the second one would be sunlight. Right, so the fish produce waste, and it goes through a nitrogen cycle. Microbes and worms convert it eventually to nitrate, which the plants take up. Plants sometimes use worms as well. And the plants then filter water that is returned to fish. Get cleaner water, and the cycle continues. So history of aquaponics, may or may not know, I find this pretty interesting. So ancient concept, right? The Aztecs used it when they floated islands of plants in the lakes, middle lakes. In Asia, popular to have fish mixed in with your rice paddies to provide fertilizer for your rice. In ancient Hawaiians, of course, in the Lo'is, grew their taro and their fish together. So more recently, in the 1970s in Cape Cod, there's a group called the New Alchemy Institute. And they were doing a lot of experiments with organic agriculture, aquaculture, and bioshelters. So basically, these bioshelters would be a contained unit, contained as possible, so no inputs. So they experimented to see if they could use aquaculture and hydroponics together in a closed loop system. Actually, a lot of aquaculture people here in Hawaii came out of New Alchemy Institute. So a lot of people, Kualoa, around that area, Kahuku, a lot of them were trained there. So a big connection between here and New Alchemy Institute of Hawaii. Fortunately, the Institute closed down in 1991, but if you look up the Institute, there's a ton of publications. They're really groundbreaking at the time for sustainable food production. So one of the researchers at New Alchemy Institute then went to North Carolina State University, where they did continued research. One of his students was Dr. James Riccozzi, who is pretty much recognized as the father of modern aquaponics. His first job, he did some time in the Peace Corps. His first job out of North Carolina State University was at the University of Virgin Islands. And he did groundbreaking work on commercial aquaponics, so that was his focus. So could use aquaponics to be a large-scale food producing system. So here in Hawaii, history goes probably about 2007. I mean, people have known about it. It's not a new concept, right? It's ancient. But people have known about it in Hawaii. Just started getting going probably about 2007. And I would say, not to leave anyone out, but I think, from my perspective, I think there are probably three large parties. It's University of Hawaii, including several researchers there, particularly CTAR, Center for Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources. Friendly Aquaponics on the Big Island, trained with Riccozzi, came to the Big Island. They did a lot of work and have since trained a lot of people over there. And Alamana Gardens with Glenn Martinez, who's done a lot of work here on this island. 2010, the largest aquaponics system in the islands was started, Fred Lau at Mari's Garden. And if you want to see some interesting work, you should go out there. He does tours, sometimes charges. If you're nice to him, it's free, because he really wants to share what he's learning. And they do some amazing stuff, large-scale aquaponics. And really, I think it's pushing the envelope of what aquaponics can do. So I strongly recommend, if you're interested in aquaponics, go out and see his farm. So the question is, so why would aquaponics work for Pacific Islands? And so a lot of the large problems we're having, right, with food production. First one is shortage of arable land. Well, aquaponics is 6 times more productive per unit area than soil farming. Second big advantage is it can be located on paved or barren land. So, right, you can set these tanks up, these systems on any type of surface that you have. And so applications for urban as well as rural food production. Second problem we run into is shortage of fresh water. So aquaponics uses 98% less water than soil farming. And another reason why it works well in Pacific Islands, I think, is because of the Polynesia's history with Ahupua'a, right? So that everything is connected, that you have to take care of everything to make sure everything works correctly. And so I think there's a history of this belief of interconnectedness, and so therefore I think it fits very well in Pacific Islands. So why aquaculture and aquaponics for me? So why do I really believe that? Well, a few reasons. First is in the last 50 years, the global fish population has decreased to about 10% of what it was back just 50 years ago. So in very, very dire straits. At the same time this happens, worldwide fish consumption is growing exponentially. And so something has to give here, right? And so we're either going to totally deplete all of the wild fish stocks, or we're going to have to come up with another way to produce fish, right? Because USDA is recommending more and more fish. They upped it this year, right, in their latest recommendations to 2 servings a week at a minimum, right? You're looking at 8 ounces per year per person. And using fish oil, so very, very popular. All the doctors are recommending it. And so consumption is growing exponentially. The other reason why I think aquaculture and aquaponics makes a lot of sense is as a protein source, fish are the most efficient. So if you look at the feed conversion ratio, so how much feed do you have to put in to get what amount of flesh, right? Sheep and cattle and sheep are right up around 5 or 6 times, so 6 kilograms of feed, right, to make 1 kilogram of flesh in the animal. Fish, when done correctly, are right around FCR of 1. And the reason for, there's a few different reasons for that. One is they're cold-blooded, so they don't have to use a lot of energy, use a lot of food to produce heat, right, to keep themselves warm, versus the other animals, right, who need to do that. And the second thing is because they're in water, right, and so they're not constantly fighting gravity. And so a lot more of the feed can be used into protein production. So a lot of history of aquaponics to this point had been on focusing on large-scale aquaponics. And so there has been a lot of work in the last few years, which I think has really, in small sectors, has changed the focus on what aquaponics can be and what the best use of it is. In a large-scale system, you run into a lot of different problems. There's a huge amount of risk. If your fish go down, right, you're going to lose all your stock, right, and that could be absolutely decimate you, right, your entire crop, and that could put you out of business, right, because you lose your customers, they're not going to come back, right, you can't recover from that. So that's one concern. Another is just in the actual technical aspects of the system. So when you've got large beds, like some people do, 100 feet long, it's a big problem trying to make sure all the nutrients don't go right at the beginning of the bed, right, and they're spread throughout the entire bed, and that everything's fertilized correctly. And so a lot of issues that honestly they haven't really figured out. Fred Lyle's doing some amazing work, but still, I mean, he'd be the first to tell you, it's got a long ways to go before it's smooth sailing. And so perhaps, right, is one of the solutions to have a distributed agriculture, right? So using lots of small systems. And so that's what we'll talk about now. So I believe that small-scale affordable aquaponics got its start, I think, with this guy, Dr. Bernard Kracke. He was up at UH Hilo through the UH system as well. And he did some groundbreaking work with static hydroponics. And if you want to look at some interesting, and I really think high-impact potential work, look this guy up. Because what he figured out is he could make one of these beds for, about $70, right? So basically, well, it's plywood, he lines it with plastic sheeting, puts the water in, and puts fertilizer in it, and then leaves it, right? And so as time goes on, the plants suck up the nutrients, and the water level gets depleted, but there's enough water kept in there so that it fertilizes throughout the 1 month span of the harvest cycle. And so basically, you can leave it, forget it, and you come back and harvest it. Incredibly cheap, incredibly efficient. So he did some groundbreaking work with that. Harry Yakoa then took this concept, so he used the bed that Dr. Kracke had, and he added a fish tank to it. And so he decided that you transfer the water from the fish, right? You make aquaponics, adding aquaculture onto what's a hydroponic system. So water gets transferred either by pump or by hand or a bucket into the hydroponic bed, flows back to the fish. Very, very simple, very inexpensive, right? There's no solid filtration or anything like that. A little bit in here, but not an appreciable amount. In a larger system, it would be a big issue. But for a small system, you'll be fine for a month, right? Harvest it, clean it out, restart it, no problem. So effective to grow a small amount of vegetables. And so probably in the system he calculated, together with aquaculture economists, that they could produce about 250 pounds of vegetables and fish. And so that's what we had talked about in the pitch, just so. And it's a very simple system, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. And here's the fly filter and fish tank. Let's see. And if you did bucket transfer, use a airlift or another system to take it into the hydroponic bed. So another group that was working is Dr. Tomorrow and Dr. Fox out at WCC. And so they developed what they call the Watermelon prototype. And so they specifically designed it for watermelon, so the people there, what do they need to grow? So a lot of taro and some herbs. And so what they've got is a two-part system. They're cheap, not as cheap as the previous system, but a little more expensive, but what you gain is versatility to grow a bunch of different crops. And so you could grow, because they've got on these two sides, one is a floating raft system, so the one with the styrofoam on top. And this one is a gravel bed system. So you could grow things like root crops, like fruiting crops, in the gravel bed system, which you cannot grow in a lot more difficult to grow in the floating raft system. And so this, we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's been used a lot in Guatemala and some in American small. So Aquaponics American Samoa began about 2011, and so there's a team of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with extension agents, but University of Hawaii is a land-grant institution, and so part of the funding is to take UH technology and to spread it throughout the Pacific. And so it employs people at community college which are affiliated with UH, like Ephraim and Francis here, and so they are extension agents that spread the technology out of American Samoa. And so they, I met them actually a couple years ago. In 2010, there was an international workshop on aquaponics, big on it. So they came out, and so they trained with Dr. Riccozzi and learned a bunch of techniques. And they went back and they decided they wanted to bring it to American Samoa. So they were influential. Dr. Ricco and one of my partners, Kiara, went out there in the summer of 2011, and they brought the first systems out there. And so Kiara was able to do a bunch of presentations there. It was funded by the USDA to go out there and do that work. And so she did a bunch of presentations, had community meetings, right, even got on TV, and I got to promote what she was doing. And they built a system while she was there with a man named Pella Foa, and he is actually the chief, or Saho, in American Samoa of a village of 97 people. And so it's up to him to take care of the well-being of his villagers. And so he's extremely interested in aquaponics and what it can do for his people. And the system, unfortunately, I don't have too many more pictures for that, but the system worked very, very well. And he is now thinking about scaling up. So a little bit later that year, another group from UH went and did some more work there. And so included some other people from CTAR, Glenn Martinez from Olamon Gardens, and one of his coworkers, Natalie Cash. And so they went to American Samoa and Samoa and put in a slightly different system, which you can see here. So you can see in the background. And so they put in a gravel bed system. So what Dr. Ko and Kiara had done was simply the floating raft was cheaper. But they decided to put in a more versatile system. So in the background you can see it. And they put in 3 different systems. One in the school and 2 through one of the women's groups in American Samoa. And so worked very, very well, and they've had great success there. Fortunately, a lot of money has dried up, so I have not done a lot of work there since. But it was a great start. So here on this island, a lot of work in Waimanalo, and this is the group I've been most active with. So I try not to take sides. There's actually a little bit of politics going on between all these groups. I think you're fighting for funding, so there's a lot of competition about who gets that funding, unfortunately. So it's been my strategy to try to be friends with everyone, take what we can from everyone, and be really inclusive, try to get everyone on the team as opposed to choosing who to go with. So these guys, because I'm active in Waimanalo right now, this is the group I've been working with most closely lately. And so so Kai and Clyde, together with Alima, who's pictured here, have done a tremendous amount of work in Waimanalo. And so Alima is just an absolute powerhouse, and so she's been able to fundraise for 50 systems in Waimanalo. And yeah.
In Waimanalo, is that also funded by USDA?
Those ones specifically, Alima's been very good at rounding up funding from other sources. Yeah.
Would you happen to know in Samoa what, you mentioned USDA, was that a grant
It was
or?
a sea grant. It was a sea grant and land grant, so 2 different grants out there. Yeah. And so here in Waimanalo, it's been OHA's been very active. Healthy Hawaii Initiative, DHHL, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and have been very supportive of what we're doing out there. And so the idea that we've had is that if you include the community in what you're doing, and the homeowners themselves, you have a lot more buy-in, right, and a lot more follow-through. And so with these systems, we have done what we call community builds. And so either, in these particular cases, we've done building probably, I think this was about 20 systems at once. So get all the materials, advertise, get everyone there, and together we build about 20 systems. And everyone puts it together to see how it works, and they're able to drive it off in their pickup truck and take it home and work with it. And it's been very successful. Systems in Waimanalo have been producing about 40 different varieties of fruits and vegetables and fish. And so it's gone very well, and here's some examples of the pilot farmers there. And there's 50 of them, so a lot more than pictured here. But they're growing all sorts of stuff. And the system there we've been using a combination of floating raft as well as a center. And so they've grown everything from blueberries, to taro, tomatoes. One thing they've been very active, especially Lima, is using it for Hawaiian medicinals. And so Lyle. Yeah.
So as people grow and they get good at this, they're gonna produce excess. I can see how they would barter and trade, but if you exchange for money, doesn't FDA and Department of Health and,
Good question.
I mean, isn't that yeah.
Very good question. I'll get to that. In
Okay.
Yeah, one second. Very, very good question. Okay, so ask more questions, by the way, because go for it.
As this, obviously it looked very successful, the plants look great. So, as the fish and produce all the nutrients that needed by the plants, or do you have to add nutrients?
So almost. Another thing I forgot to mention. So one thing Dr. Akko did that was different and new is he's actually a microbiologist. So he studied. Okay, if you input, he studied very, very carefully. So he's got a spectrophotometer, so he looks in, can measure the nutrients coming in, nutrients coming out. And so what he did was he measured the nutrients in the feed, and then he measured the nutrients in the hydroponic bed. And he found out that in almost all areas, it was enough, but in a couple, offhand, I have to look it up, but there's a few different things you have to add. Kelp is one, magnesium, iron, and so you need to make sure it balances, because the plants need those nutrients that actually do not come out of the feed. Good question.
And on a small scale like this, how brittle is this system? I mean, if you go away a weekend and you don't add the calcium or the magnesium, you've got instant problems?
It'll turn a little bit yellow, but you're not going to lose the plants.
Okay, so you have a warning as
Yeah.
to there's something wrong. Okay.
Yeah, and in this distributed agriculture, which I'll talk about a little bit more, right? If one family goes down, right, that's only a small percentage of your production, right? You have plenty of families that can cover for them. And so, so versus like in a commercial system, right, you lose all your fish, you've got no more fertilizer for the month, and then you're going to lose all your crops, right? And no one to fall back on to cover for you. So what we've done is try to use a lot of the work that these people have done and see if we could coordinate it together with a business model that would be sustainable. And so social enterprise, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but basically it's a business with a double bottom line. So both it's self-sufficient financially, so it makes money, and it also does good. And so we are trying to figure out, can we come up with social enterprise, including aquaponics, that makes enough money to support, not only support itself, but also provide for money to expand. And so our organization called Ho'olulu Pacific, so Ho'olulu in Hawaiian means to grow or to inspire. And that's what we hope to do throughout the Pacific Islands and eventually the world. So mission statement, we want to improve self-sufficiency and holistic health of Pacific Islands and around the world through innovations in farming and distributed agriculture. Hopefully this will work and I can get back here. So like I said, trying to be as inclusive as possible. Let's see. This works. So, we have a very inclusive team. So, with myself, Alema, some other people who helped develop the business model with us. Some guys very, very experienced, like Eric, Oceanic Institute, has worked around the world in aquaculture and aquaponics in Brazil, where we hope to get to someday. And Scott, who is fantastic at helping to grow technology companies. And then we work with a large number of community advisors and partners from all the areas, many areas of the community. So everything from behavioral health, which we'll talk about in a second, why this is significant, as well as nutrition, as well as aquaponic experts. So got a great team, which we believe in, and this is what we're hoping to do. So the idea is, we talked about in the, and I'll get to your question here. So the idea, as we talked about in the video, right, is can you coordinate these small producers, right, into a larger system? And so the idea is that the family farmers will produce surplus vegetables, which are then sold to us. We give the farmers money, right, and then we take that produce and sell it to a local store, restaurant. And with that money, it goes back into our organization, right? And that's then able to fund our operations in another community. Okay. And eventually, right, we would hope to spread not only the Pacific, but then throughout the world with this same model. And as Dr. Watley said, I'd like to thank GLSD department as well as Hawaii Pacific University, because that's actually really where we got our start. So we conceived this idea, the business model, approached Dr. Watley to fund us to go to Harvard through this conference, which if you're interested in social enterprise, is unbelievable. So they've got about 1,500 people from around the world, and I mean, they've got huge foundations represented. And so huge honor to be invited, and very thankful to have this funding information for you to go. Fortunate enough to win, which then led us to other competitions. Dell has a sponsors a lab here in Social Enterprise where it's like kind of boot camp for social enterprise people. And from there, was able to get some support from Yale Law School startup practicum, who's given us legal advice. And so again, thank you very much, Dave, for you where it all began. So basically, talk about next some of what dealing with your question. And so some of the successes and failures of what we've seen so far are trying to coordinate this agriculture. So lessons learned, so it does produce food, right? And it produces sometimes enough for the family, depending on how big it is, how much they'd like to eat. But there's not really enough, at least from the systems we were using previously, and the ones you see in the pictures, to yield enough surplus that you turn around and sell it. And so had to go back to the drawing board, come up with a larger system, which I'll show you in a second. The other problem is there's a lot of variability in the crop quality. So some of it's great, right, could easily be sellable, and some of it is not. And so if you're going to try to get into business, right? You really need to make sure that's uniform and that your customers are happy. And a lot of that we think are due to seedling health, so that it's not started all at the same size, they're not all healthy, and also farmer inexperience. And so and the final problem is farmers can't find buyers in small volumes. So if you got a little bit of produce, say it's a few pounds a week, who are you gonna find to buy it, right? Not a lot of people. And so we need to coordinate that, get a lot of them growing together. And so the idea is, we are now going to work with 50 farmers at once. And so we're looking for funding, a bunch of different sources to do that. The systems are larger. So it looks like this. Don't mind the solar panel in there and a windmill, which aren't applicable to Lebanon, but other parts of the world would be, because you're like to be able to do it without access to electricity. And so this is 96 square feet, so 3 beds that hold cinder, as well as a 500-gallon fish tank. And based on the numbers we've seen from the home systems as well as commercial farmers with Fred Lau, we calculate that we should be able to grow over 2,000 pounds of vegetables. We've also tweaked the system, a few tricks up our sleeve, things we've learned from the home farmers as well as Fred Lau, and about 480 pounds of fish. And so what that means is this is now 3 times what a family needs, based on USDA recommended vegetables per week, per year. And so 3 times what a family needs. So family taking 1/3, other 2/3 we can turn around and sell. So the idea is that we would visit each farm, okay, once a week, each family farm, and love your feedback and ideas on this. So the idea is we would visit each farm once a week. And so when we do that, we're supplying them with everything they need to have a successful harvest. So seedlings, we're supplying a constant supply of seedlings that are healthy with the fish feed and with any supplements they need. The other thing, with response to your question, is we would be doing the harvesting. So, and in talking to a food safety coach, if we're handling the harvesting, then eliminates the burden from them. And so we do the harvesting, collecting, and then the people in this program are meet with us once a week at their homes and also once a month in a larger system, larger group. And the idea is that they're part of this cohort, and we're working on not just food production, but holistic health, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And so the idea is there are 4 different revenue streams. So the systems are done on a rent-own basis with the family farmers, and so they're charged a little bit more than it costs us to make. So that's one revenue stream. Second revenue stream is from a commercial system we've got, as you saw in the video, as well as the home farmers, where we take their produce, turn around and sell it for a profit. The third one is we're selling systems to wealthier individuals in the community. So a lot of people are interested in aquaponics, right? We've got a modified system with only 1 tray, which we have available for sale. And then these harvest kits, which we figure would simplify things. You don't have to go around buying all these supplements in small quantities, right? We'd buy this and distribute it, package it, and all you need, right, to harvest one time and sell this to both the farmers that we're working with as well as to the general public. Again, for the farmers we're working with in Waimanalo, I'm not looking to make money, a ton of money here, just hoping to make ends meet and a little bit of excess revenue. And the idea is that if we've got distributed revenue sources, it's a more stable financial situation. And that we're able, through this revenue, we're able to grow our program. And so with these group of 50 farmers, we are looking at holistic health. And so with our community partners, we're very excited. We'd be able to measure many, many things and many aspects of health. So through a health survey that's been recommended, we're able to address social and cultural. So these are 5 petals. Community School developed a concept of well-being, the Huakaki. And so the idea is that your health isn't just physical health, right? So you've got social and cultural health, physical health, cognitive, material and economic, and after you read that in the back, and emotional. And so we looked at various ways we can measure this and arrive at metrics. Both on the physical aspects as well as cognitive. So are they learning about science, or learning about systems, material and economic, because everything's from avoided food costs, which we calculate to be very significant. $6,000 a year, right? The money they don't have to spend on vegetables, and it's already there. USDA, the Food Security Survey, which they measure how do you feel about your access to food, right? Do you feel worried about that on a weekly basis? And then increased income, right? We're paying them, so that'll also contribute to their material and economic health. And so that's the idea behind what we're doing. We've been fortunate enough to be supported by a few foundations already. Atherton Family Foundation and OHA has also been very supportive. We are always looking to talk to people, both with ideas as well as monetary support. And so, love to talk to you afterwards, and please check out our website and talk to me afterwards. All right.
We got time for questions?
I'm interested to know what the input exactly is. What is the fish feed, and where are you getting that?
Okay. So fish feed is standard, pretty standard. So we use a spreading feed, 45%, 45 or 35%, depending on the system.
Where does that come from?
So that does come from off island, right? There has been a push to have that produced in Hawaii. Unfortunately, the funding has not come in, and unfortunately, the feed expert in Hawaii has just announced he's retiring at Oceana